Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited for this webinar. This webinar is going to be presented by myself, Melissa, and my colleague Adrian from Vino Shipper. And then we have Charles from Sellerfront here, who's going to present how to really make your website more useful to you and turn those visits into sales and wine club signups. So Charles has a presentation. Throughout that, we have our chat enabled as well as our Q&A. If you have any questions, please drop them into either the Q&A section or the webinar chat that you can see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Adrian and I will be monitoring those and will either respond to you or we'll interrupt Charles and have him give you some answers as well. So whenever you're ready, Charles, you can take it away.
Okay, let's see if we can get this to work. So, need to share my screen. Okay, is that all visible to everyone?
Yes, we can see it.
Great, okay. Well, welcome everyone to Website Basics that Drive More Sales. My name is Charles Perry, and if I were in your shoes, the first thing I'd be wondering is, who the heck are you, and why should I believe anything you have to say? I'm the owner of Sellerfront, and we are in the business of building e-commerce websites specifically for small wineries and vineyards. I've been building websites for small businesses now for over 10 years. And in that time, I have seen a lot of websites. I've seen a lot that work, a lot that don't. I've seen some really good ones and some that aren't quite so good. What I hope today is to be able to take some of those lessons I've learned and share them with you so that you can apply them back to your own winery. We're going to be talking today about two broad buckets of information. The first one is essential website pages for wineries. And so these are sort of the pages that I think pretty much any winery should have. It's information that all your customers are going to be looking for, and they really are the essentials. The other bucket of information we're going to be looking at is how to nudge your customers into doing what you want. So, trying to convert visitors into email list signups, into having them purchase wine. Some of the techniques that we can use to try to guide their behavior and get them to take the actions that we hope. So let's go ahead and start with essential web pages for wineries. When we're talking about the essential web pages for wineries, there's a few that we're going to talk about, but there's two in particular that I want to start with. And that is telling your story and telling the story of your wine. When you're talking about your story, what we're talking about is the story of the winery, the story of the winemaker, the winery owner, how it is you got into wine, what makes you so passionate about wine. Basically, your connection. This is your chance to share your passion with the customer and to convince them of your sincerity. When we're talking about your wine story, what we're talking about is why you make the wines that you make. Do you have a particular philosophy of wine? Do you only make whole cluster wines? Do you only make wines in old world style, or maybe you only make blends? Whatever it is that makes your wine a little bit different than the winery down the road. Because when it comes right down to it, as we all know, stories sell wine. I mean, people don't have an opportunity to taste the wine until they've already purchased it. And once they've tasted it, it's too late to return it. And so with your stories, the hope is that you are going to make a connection with the customer and sort of get them over that hurdle, that hesitation to get them to purchase your wine. I want to look at two examples of some pages that I think do a really good job with telling their story and telling the story of their wine. The first one is Vincent Wine Company up in Willamette Valley. This is a sort of a short form of how to put a page together that tells your story. As you can probably already notice, the first thing that grabs your attention is that big smiling picture of Vincent in a bin stomping grapes. There's just no way around it. That's a really fun picture. He's obviously having fun. I think the fun is infectious and it really draws the reader in. But when you look at the text, there's really not a lot there. There's only two paragraphs and they're fairly short. But in those two paragraphs, he really packs a lot in. He starts by telling us a little bit about his background and his apprenticeship. He tells us a little about his wine philosophy, that he creates low input wines, that he focuses on sustainably farmed grapes. And he tells us a fun story about his label, that Vincent Wine Company is not just named after him, but also after the patron saint of winemakers, St. Vincent of Saragossa. And he tells us a little bit about the types of wines that his winery makes. All the basics. He shares the story. He makes it fun, and I think that's a really good way of doing it. The one thing I do want to highlight, and I think I mentioned this before, is that it's relatively short. There's only 2 paragraphs, and I think it's short enough that people might actually read the whole thing. We live in an age of short attention spans, and I think that most of the text that we write on websites is frankly wasted because I don't think it's ever read. So I think keeping it short is something that's valuable. However, there are people who don't agree with me, and I completely understand that. And so I want to show you one other example of sort of an R story kind of website or web page, and that is from Sunbreak Wines. He takes a longer tack on it. And I already explained that my bias is towards short text, but if you're going to do a longer presentation of your story, I think this is a really great way of doing it. There's several paragraphs there, but whether the author knew it or not, he makes use of a technique called progressive disclosure, in that he presents a little bit of information, and in each progressive paragraph, he presents more information, any one of which is a logical jumping off point. So the reader can choose to read as much or as little as he wants. Let me tell you what I mean. Let's take a look at this first paragraph. And calling it a paragraph might be a bit of a stretch. It's really one sentence. It says, our small family-run winery produces distinctive Willamette Valley Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, small batch vermouth, and artisanal sparkling cider. That's great. One sentence. In that one sentence, he explains what his winery is all about. This is essentially the elevator pitch. At this point, the reader can take that elevator pitch and be happy and go off to shop for wine. Or if he's interested, he can keep reading and get a little bit more information. So in the second paragraph, if the reader keeps reading, he gets a description of the winemaker background and the winemaker's philosophy. A little bit more information to flesh out that elevator pitch that we got earlier. At that point, if the reader's done, he can go off to shop for wine. Or if he's really interested, he can keep reading, jump into the third paragraph, where the author gives a simple description of the wine lineup. It's simple, it's easy to understand. He talks about how he makes only 3 different kinds of Pinot Noir. One is whole cluster, one is destemmed, one is a blend. And I think by structuring it that way, it makes for an easy to understand lineup that any wine consumer can really wrap their head around. At that point, the reader can decide, okay, I've had enough. I'm going to go shop for wine. But if he wants more, as we saw earlier, there's lots of more text there he can read. He can dive into this information as much as he wants, and he can go as far down the rabbit hole as he desires. So we've talked about telling your story and telling your wine story. The next thing I want to talk about are, it's not really quite as exciting to be quite honest, but it is necessary. And that's all the different administrative pages that sort of have to be on a website. When we're talking about administrative pages, probably first and foremost, we're talking about a privacy policy. How do you use your customers' information? This is something that more and more consumers are becoming aware of, and they're concerned about how their information is used, and they want to know that they can trust the winemakers that they're working with. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not really in a position to advise you on how to put together your privacy policy. And besides, everybody's use of information is a little bit different. My best suggestion to you is to actually hire a lawyer. I know lawyers have a reputation for being expensive, but on this kind of thing where there's usually templates involved, it can be fairly affordable, and you'll be sure to get the best job. However, if you don't want to hire a lawyer, or if it's not in your budget, I will say there are a lot of privacy policies that are out on the internet, and you could probably find one that you could use as a starting point for your own. Besides the privacy policy, terms of service is another one that's pretty critical to your website. Alcohol is a very regulated industry, as you all know, and there's probably lots of legalese and disclaimers that might be required for your sales. If you have particular legal requirements surrounding alcohol, maybe your website is only intended for adults over the age of 21, this would be a good place to note that. If you have refund policies that you want to state, this would be the place that those would go. If you have to have a particular cancellation policy, especially for unilateral cancellations due to legal or shipping restrictions, make sure to note those here as well. And if you have shipping policies you want to make the consumer aware of, whether that is that you only ship during certain months of the year, or maybe you reserve the right to hold shipments because of weather, make sure you put that in here. We don't want there to be any unhappy surprises. The last type of administrative page I want to talk about is contact information or visitor information. This is basically how can the consumer get a hold of you. And so whether this is on its own separate page or whether this is in the footer at the bottom of the website, you need to make sure you have that contact information so they can buy wine, first of all, but also so they can contact you with any questions they might have. So we're talking about things like telephone numbers, email address, contact form. By the way, if your email address is being used for both personal and business use, I suggest you get a separate one for business use. It just makes it a whole lot easier to keep things separated, and you're sure to never miss an email that way. And as far as contact forms, I do understand the attraction of contact forms. I'm personally not a fan of them. I think they add too much friction to the relationship between the customer and the winemaker. But I do understand that there are different opinions on that. So if you have a contact form that you'd like to use, this is probably the page where that would belong. And then finally, if you offer tastings, if you offer the ability for customers to come into your facility, make sure you have information about where it is, so addresses, maybe information about tastings and when they're available, maybe a map so that they can find you. Those are the bare basics. I do want to show one example with you, share one example with you from Chains North, or 8 Chains North in Virginia, that I think does a particularly good job of putting together a visitor information page. You can see here that it starts with some really attractive photography that makes it seem like a place that you would want to visit. They then follow up with their hours of operation and their address so that things are easy to find. Once they've established the basics of where they are and how you can find them, then they continue down into some additional information about all the different options that you have once you're there. So they have wine tasting options, they have food options, the charcuterie. If you continue scrolling down, you then get to the final pieces of information that you need, which are the hours of operation, address, map, telephone number, email address, those sorts of things. The thing that I think makes this so nice, besides obviously having all the basic information you need, is it's so graphical. It does a really great job of making this seem like a place that would be fun to go visit and hang out at, and it makes it seem like a place that you'd want to go. And I think the quality of photography they have really goes a long way towards making that happen. So we've talked about telling your story, telling your wine story, and now some administrative pages. The last type of essential web page I want to talk about is your product and purchase pages. And many would argue that these are probably the most important pages on your website because these are the pages where your customers give you money. So let's talk in detail about this. When we're talking about product and purchase pages, there are 3 main things that I want to make sure that we get across. And the first one is you've got to make it easy to make a purchase. Make your purchase pages easy to find. Don't make people hunt around for them. Put an obvious button or an obvious menu item in your navigation menu that reads wine or shop or purchase or acquire or whatever the language is that you want to use. Don't make your customers dig through your website. Make it as easy as possible for them to find that information and put wine in their cart. I've seen way too many examples of wineries that add lots of layers between their homepage and the ability of a customer to actually give you money. And personally, I think that's a mistake. To give you one extreme example, I ran into a winery that, in order to purchase wine, you land on their homepage and then you find their wine link and you click on that. But then you're not presented with wines, you're actually presented with categories of wines. So you've got to select whether you want a red wine or a white wine or a sparkling wine. The consumer goes, okay, fine, red wine. So they click on red wine, and then they're presented with a selection of red wines they can choose from. So then they click on the particular wine they're interested in, and that takes them to a wine description with tasting notes and alcohol levels and all those sorts of things. But you can't actually purchase from there. You've got to click the purchase button to actually take you to the page where you can purchase so that you can actually then put the wine in your cart. That's way too much. If this was not a dedicated consumer, they would have given up about halfway through this. The goal, I think, for any e-commerce site, and wine in particular, is to minimize the number of clicks that are needed between someone landing on your homepage and putting wine in your cart. Flatten that hierarchy. You don't need 6 levels of indirection like the example I talked about earlier. I would say probably 3 is the most I would have. You have your homepage, have your catalog page, and then have your details page where they can make the purchase. The other thing I'll advise is that if you can, make sure you put a purchase button at every level of that hierarchy, not just at the individual product page. If you can, you want to make sure you put them in those catalog pages as well, so that if somebody wants to put together that perfect mixed case, they can do that easily. If someone wants to put together a mixed case of your wine, don't make them click into a wine, add it to the cart, bounce back out, go to the next wine, add it to cart, bounce back out. If you have buttons on your catalog page, they can just simply put 2 of this and 3 of that and 4 of the other in the cart, all from the same page, and be on their way. Number 2, let's talk about product images. So when we're building an online store, you need to keep in mind that you are building an online store. You're not just building a wine list. So your shop shouldn't just be a list of the wines and the vintages. Add some images. These are going to add some visual interest. They're going to engage the customer, bring them in, make them stick around on your page. But it's also going to add confidence that they're actually purchasing the right wine. And this is why you need to have a product image for every single product, because too many products are very close to each other. We all have bottlings that are exactly the same, except for one bottling is from one vintage and the other bottling is from the other vintage. Or you might have two bottlings, one of which is from block A of a vineyard and one is from block B of a vineyard. There's just so many cases where things are very similar that having that label available, having the ability of the customer to actually look at the bottle, will go that last step to make sure that they feel comfortable that they're buying what they think they're buying and that they're not buying something else by mistake. And the last thing I want to advise you is to make sure these product images that you're using look professional. Now, there's lots of ways you can do that, but I'm going to give you 3 strategies so that you can create some really great product images that look the best and paint your winery in the best light. The first one, obviously, hire a photographer, right? Professional photography is great. This is an example from a customer of ours, and I know that he uses professional photography because he's talked to me about it. Each bottle that he gets photographed goes to his photographer, is put in light-controlled conditions, and each photo is actually taken twice. There's one photo that's taken for the bottle, and then a second photo that's taken of the label, and the 2 images are digitally merged. And as you can see here, the results are great. You end up with an image that properly exposes both the bottle and the label. Everything's readable. You can even read the printing on the cork. It looks great. And so I guess my best advice is, if you want professional results, professional photography is probably the easiest way to get that. However, it can be expensive, and I realize that. Cash flow is an issue for everybody. Not everybody can afford to have professional photography of every SKU, especially if you have a lot of SKUs. And even if you can, you might not have the time, because time is always an issue as well. So I want to offer one other example. If you can't do professional photography, or you don't want to, you can always try to do it yourself, or get some other gifted amateurs involved. This is another example from Sunbreak Wines, and the winery owner here takes his own photography, and I think it's a really good example of amateur photography done well. We have 3 images on the screen. The one on the left is one that was taken of the bottle in a light box, which is sort of imagine like a box that's got an open front, but it's made of white cloth, and it helps control some reflections and things like that. But this was actually taken with an iPhone. You can get really good results with smartphones these days, and if you are careful with it and buy a little bit of equipment, you can get some really good results. The center photo is another photo taken by the winemaker, but this was taken outdoors in conditions that were not controlled for light. You can tell from the reflections on the bottle. Knowing that the reflections might be an issue, he took the step of cropping that down and resulting in the image on the right, which is the one that was actually used in his catalog. So this is, I think, some really good examples of how you can do some amateur photography. A few things to be aware of if you are trying to take your own photographs is be aware of bad lighting. Lighting that is too sharp or not light enough can both be problematic. Glass is very shiny, and the wrong lighting can cause glare or reflections. Be aware of dark labels and grainy photos that can happen when the lighting is insufficient. And the last thing I want to sort of warn you about is specifically about reflections on bottles. If you look at that center photo pretty closely, you can see the reflections of the tree lines in the background. That's sort of a dead giveaway that the photo wasn't taken in light controlled conditions, which is not by itself necessarily a problem. The reason I want to draw your attention to that is because if you look at that bottle, that's all you see are trees. This photographer did a very good job of controlling those reflections. People who are less careful will often accidentally end up with their own face in the reflection on a bottle. And so now all of a sudden your customers you can't help but stare at you in the bottle as they're shopping for wine. That's probably not the look you're going for. And so if you're taking your own photographs, that's one thing in particular that I'm going to warn you about to keep an eye out for. So we've looked at using professional photography. We've looked at taking your own photographs. But if you can't afford professional photography and you either don't want to or don't feel capable of doing the photographs yourself, the last suggestion I have for you is to simply don't. Don't use photographs at all, and instead just use your label art. You guys already have label art for all of your bottles. People are used to seeing that as part of your brand. They're used to seeing that label as the identifier for that particular wine. And I think label art is a great option. Not just because you already have it and have already paid for it, but because maximizing that label size, making that label the entire image, not only highlights the art, but it also makes the text in that label larger and easier to read. And it makes it easier for the consumer to distinguish between two different bottlings of, which one is the regular bottling, which bottling, and which one is the special bottling. It makes it all the easier for the consumer to figure out which bottle is which. So we have looked at making things easy to purchase. We've looked at product images. The last thing I want to talk about on product and purchase pages is social proof. Now, if you're not familiar with the term social proof, it is a concept that's been borrowed from psychology, and basically it is the tendency of people to copy other people's behavior when they're in uncertain situations. And I can't think of any other situation that is more uncertain than trying to purchase a wine that I've never tasted before and not knowing which one is which, especially if you're not a confident wine purchaser. And so, when we're talking about social proof, what we're basically doing is talking about trying to give evidence that other people like this particular bottle or this particular action. And, if they're uncertain what to do, there's a tendency for them to follow along. You see this a lot online. For example, on Facebook, if you go to a page, you'll see that this page has so many likes. Well, what they're doing there is advertising that, all of these people like this page, you might like it too. And so you go ahead and read it. Or if you go to a YouTube website and you look at the number of subscribers that a particular channel has, you can see that they have 3,000 subscribers or 10,000 subscribers. And the idea being, if all of these people like this channel, you should really check it out too. Or if you go to an Amazon review page or an Amazon page and scroll down to look at the reviews, you'll see, just screen after screen after screen of reviews of all the things that it does well and all the things that it doesn't do well, and the reason why it's great and the reason why it's not. But the culmination of all those reviews is giving the reader confidence that he's getting all the details that he needs, that all these people that are just like him have purchased this product and have checked it out, and he's basically vouching for it by saying, how great it is for them. And, as a result, you might think it's great for you too. One place I think does a really good job of using social proof and sort of bringing all these pieces together is the App Store. So I want to share a screen with you from that. This is actually a screen from the iOS App Store, and it is the page for one of my favorite weather apps. And if you look at this, you can see lots of different social proof being put together here for the consumer to check out. First and foremost, you'll probably notice that there is a rating up at the upper left. This particular app has 4.7 out of 5 stars. That's pretty good. I mean, 4.5 or 4.7 rounds up to 5 stars for me. If all these people think so highly of this app, maybe it's something I should check out. Directly below that, you'll find an expert endorsement, right? You have the editor's choice. The editors of the App Store presumably see a lot of different apps in their day-to-day work, and if they have gone out of their way to specifically endorse this app and say that this is a great example of a weather app, maybe it's something I should check out. Maybe this is one that I should download too. And to its right, you'll see just a regular customer review. It's a man on the street view of this app. This particular user gives it 5 stars and writes, "It's the best weather app I've ever used." Well, if a customer who uses this on a daily basis, just like I'll be, if he likes it this much, maybe it's worth me checking out. That's the thought process that they're trying to engender, and that's a thought process that you can use in your own website as well. You can use these same techniques on your own purchase pages. In the world of wine, we don't really have 5-star ratings, but we do have wine scores. I know not everyone likes to talk about wine scores. Not everyone believes in wine scores, but believe in them or not, wine scores can sell wine. So if you have wine scores from professionals like Dunnick or Suckling or Wine Advocate or whoever else, and they're good, you might consider putting them on your webpage. Especially for unsophisticated wine purchasers, that can be the little nudge that they need to get them over the line to try a bottle and see if they like it themselves. Or if you don't have professional wine scores, maybe you can look at some consumer sites. Sites like Cellar Tracker, Vivino, they all have aggregate scores that can be used. And if the public likes your wine, it might be worth noting on your website. Basically, what these scores do is they provide confidence to consumers who are uncertain about what to do next. If they don't know where to start or they don't know how to finish, the score can be the nudge they need to get them to purchase. In addition to ratings, you can also use expert endorsements. Now, we don't have App Store editors in the wine world, but we do have professional wine reviewers, and they all have a lot of opinions and they try a lot of wines. If you have a professional wine reviewer that's tried your wine and has something nice to say, it might be worth putting an excerpt on your purchase page so that other people can see the nice things that they've said and the high opinion they have of your wines. As far as customer reviews go, we have a lot of those. We have all kinds of tasting notes all over the internet. If you find tasting notes in Cellar Tracker or Vivino or any place else where that say nice things about your wine and you think they're particularly compelling, it's probably worth investigating, seeking permission to put them on your website. If you get emails from direct-to-consumer customers who talk about how great your wine is, or maybe they used your sparkling wine to toast their engagement, or whatever the case might be. Write them back and thank them, obviously, but then ask them if you might be able to use the quote on your website. Those are great little testimonials to convince customers that other people like the wine and it's worth them checking out as well. So those are our essential web pages for wineries: telling your story, telling your wine story, the different administrative pages that are required, and then product and purchase pages. But we do have a couple honorable mentions. And first among those honorable mentions is a blog or some sort of news feed. And I'll tell you, I almost flagged this as essential only because it is such a huge SEO win. Search engines like Google, like Bing, they love to see steady streams of new content appear on the website for them to index and to share with their customers. You really can do a world of good for your website just by consistently posting over a time period. And it's not going to happen overnight, but over the months, you will see results almost always. And it's also a great way to connect with customers. Your customers love to hear about what's going on in your winery and what's going on with the grapes this year, what's going on with this year's vintage. This is a great way to share that story and connect with your customers and turn, a one-time customer into a loyal customer that comes back and purchases year after year after year. As for what to write about, there's all kinds of things you can write about. You can write about what's going on in the vineyard, what's going on in the winery, anything that's going on with the staff. Maybe there's a marriage or a baby that was born. Any event announcements that you have as far as harvest parties or anything else that you're going to open houses, those sorts of things. And then also, if you have any general thoughts about wine or about the wine industry, this is a great place to share those. Your customers are interested in what you have to say. This is a great way to share that with an audience. If you're looking for some good inspiration on how to handle a blog, I will point you to the blog at Tablas Creek. It's written by Jason Haas, and he does a really great job of being consistent with his blog and writing about a variety of interesting things. And if you look through this list here, he talks about everything from growing and weather conditions this year to industry news to the latest club release and which wines are going to end up on the doorstep of their wine club members. He goes to the trouble of retasting past vintages and talking about their pros and their cons. He talks about current release wines and how they compare. He even talks about food. It has nothing to do with the food they serve at Tablas Creek. It's just they're interested in food, and there's a lot of overlap between the world of wine and the world of food. These are all things that you can write about as well. And if you're looking for inspiration, I think this is a great place to start. Obviously, you're not going to write his stuff. You're going to write your own take on these topics. But if you're looking for inspiration on what you could write about, this is a great place to start. So we talked about blogs and newsfeed. The second honorable mention I want to mention is vineyard information, because we all love to talk about terroir. So if you want a place to talk about your grapes, talk about your vineyard, this is the place to put that information, especially for your customers who are really into this and want to learn as much as possible about where you're getting your grapes from. You can talk about your soils. You can talk about the blocks that you pull grapes from. You can talk about the particular clones of grapes that you're growing. If you have anything in your vineyard that's interesting as far as its exposures or something like that, you can put maps of the vineyard to show which ways give the viewer an idea of the topography of the vineyard, or a map of the AVA to show where in the AVA your vineyard appears. The other thing I'll advise is if you happen to either own or purchase grapes from a winery that's got a reputation, this is a great place to brag about that. If your winery has a little bit of cachet, point that out and talk about its history, talk about its ownership, talk about why it produces such better wines, or such better grapes than other places. I think it's when you're talking about vineyard information, one site that does a really good job of sort of sharing information about their vineyards is Bethel Heights up in Willamette Valley. And they have a pretty extensive vineyard information page. And if you look at this, it starts, of course, with a nice, pretty photo, sort of pulls you in. But then it goes on to talk about the history of the vineyard. It has a map that sort of orients the reader to the lay of the land. And then it gives details of every vineyard, including the date that it was planted, the elevation of the vineyards, the soils that are involved, the grape varieties that are grown, along with the acreage of each planting, and then a short paragraph about what makes each of these different vineyards special. So if you're looking for inspiration on what a vineyard information page can look like, I think this is a good example. So as far as honorable mentions go, we've talked about the blog, we've talked about vineyard information. The last one I want to talk about is trade and distribution information. Now, this is not usually one that is going to be customer facing. This is more facing the wholesale sector. However, I do have one customer that looks at the trade and distribution page as customer facing, which I think is an interesting take. He looks at it, whether he would use these words or not, they sort of act as a form of social proof for him. And the way he looks at it is, if all of these distributors who are trusted professionals in their industry, if all of these distributors think so highly of his wine that they're willing to import it into their area, that's probably something his direct to consumer customers are going to be interested in knowing as well. It sort of gives a little more maybe credibility to a wine that is distributed across the U.S., so that they can share that information with their direct to consumer customers. But as far as what should go on a trade and distribution page, you're probably going to include any tech sheets that you have. If you have logos or images you want to make available, label images would be another thing you might want to include here, a list of distribution partners, any regulatory information that's required. And if you are distributing your wines into regions that require ingredient labels or nutritional information, this would be a great place to put that, because then you can just put a QR code on your label, depending on the area, of course, but it's popular to use a QR code to link back to this information, and that gives you the ability to update your ingredient and nutritional information on your website rather than having to reprint labels. As far as examples of good trade and distribution pages, I'm going to again return to Bethel Heights. I think they have a really good one. It's quite extensive, and they have a section for logo art. So if you want to put your Bethel Heights logo at the top of the article you're writing about them, you have the ability to do that because they provide high resolution artwork. They have vineyard certification information about all of their vineyards. Some really nice photography that could accompany any articles that are being written. Of course, their tech sheets. They've got a lot of those. They've got tech sheets for every vintage of every wine. They've got some examples of different press they've received, media attention in magazines and online articles, as well as wine scores and reviews. And they have a short series of YouTube videos that their winemaker made, talking about wine, talking about the vineyards, and talking about the topography of their vineyards. So those are our honorable mentions: blogs, vineyard information, and trade and distribution information. And together with the ones we spoke about earlier, those are our essential web pages for wineries. So that is the end of our first bucket, and I'm going to ask Melissa now if she wants to cut in for questions or if we should just continue.
Yeah, we have some cool questions and then some things I just want to mention. So one of the first questions we got was that they only sell through Vino Shipper and do they need their own terms and conditions? So it's kind of a two-part answer. For your general website and your club and commitments, cancellations, things like that, it's strongly recommended that the winery maintain their own policy, terms, conditions, privacy policy, et cetera, on their website. When it comes to the transaction, you are covered essentially under Vino Shippers terms and conditions, but we would suggest having terms and conditions listed on your website for your general website information. I'm not sure if you agree with that, Charles, but that is kind of what we were talking
No, I
about on
think
the
that's probably
background
right. I
here.
mean, obviously, if Shipper's handling the shipping part, they can lean on the terms that you already provide, but their whole website isn't through there, and they certainly are going to need things like policies and things like that. Their customers are going to want to know how they're handling their email addresses and their phone numbers at the very least. And if they
Right.
have other specific policies that might be a little quirky or a little bit not completely taken into account, they'll want to document those in their terms and conditions as well.
Yeah. And I know you talked about product images over label images. Is there's one that you think is better just generally if you had to pick?
Well, if money was no object, I would probably go for professional photography. I think that the results are just really nice, and there's just something about a professionally done photograph that I think turns out really well when they're done correctly. However, money is always an object, and so I think if it
Yeah.
were my winery, I would probably just do wine labels or bottle labels myself. I think that's everyone is overworked, everyone is crunched for time, everyone is crunched for money, and I think that you can get some very professional results just by putting bottle labels up there. And as I mentioned earlier, that there's a good argument in favor of those anyways, just for readability, if nothing else.
Right. And in the chat, we've had a lot of communication about, ways to get nice photos done. So thank you, everyone. What a nice community, seeing everyone kind of give each other some information and some ideas. Also, everyone that has commented anything about a web integration and information that they're interested, myself and Adrian have been making notes. We will reach out to you and find out what information exactly that you would like to see. Maybe we can get a webinar in the future about specific web integrations going. And then the question about Virginia and California that we have, we can absolutely email you directly. You will need to get your own California direct to consumer shippers permit. And then Virginia is still not able to be shipped through Vino Shipper. You would have to get your own shipping permit, and I think you can only ship from a warehouse. So that's something we will follow up with you on. Let me see if I can find any other questions. Would you suggest the blog or news feed be its own page? And if so, what would you call that tab in your on your site? Would you call it like news or what do you think is a good that attracts someone to click on that?
Yeah, the first part of the question is yes, I think it should be its own page. You don't probably want to intermingle that with the sales type stuff that you're going to have on your homepage. As far as what to name it, I think the two most obvious ones are either blog or news. Those are the two that I see the most often, and I think pretty much everyone knows what that means. If I were a more, and I don't mean this in any way derogatory either way. If you're consider yourself a more serious brand for serious consumers, maybe news because that sounds more official. If your sort of corporate vibe is more laid back, more approachable, maybe just call it blog and be done with it. But I don't think there's a right or wrong answer for either one. Those are the two that I see most often.
Okay. Um, If you only have wine labels, you could use AI to put it on a bottle for a professional product look. That's kind of an interesting. There is so many tools now that you could take an image and get it cleaned up by using either AI or Canva or things like that. So even now with like the new iPhones and the new Samsungs, they have very good cameras. So if you take a picture and then, use AI or some other tools to kind of clean that up, you can get that handled.
Just to note on that, I do create our product images for alumni wine programs, and I do a similar thing. I mean, I do it manually through Photoshop, but I have blank bottles that have been cleaned up so that, like Charles was talking about, you're not having, pictures of my face in the background of it. And then I put the label on from there. So that is also, if you know someone who, well versed in Photoshop, that's also an option.
Yeah. And then the last question was about, is Tennessee off the ship list? It is not. We can still ship to Tennessee. So that is
If you're
great.
if you're not seeing that on your ship to list, if you could send us an email at customer service at VinoShipper.com, we will look into that for you.
Yeah, we'll see. Share the share the blank bottle, says Louis to you, Adrian.
I'd have to look into that. It's
I
they've been well worked.
I will say on that same front, if you get a subscription to something like one of the stock photo sites, whether that's Shutterstock or iStock Photo or something like that, you can find a lot of blank bottles there that you can apply your labels to. And depending on they are for purchase, but they're pretty cheap, certainly cheaper than photography. But if you buy once you buy the image, depending on what you get, it's either an image that a designer can apply it to, or sometimes it's a template, and you apply the image as a layer into Photoshop, and then it automatically applies it to the bottle. So you might poke around there and see what you can find.
All right, I think I got all of them. All right, I think you can move on to your next section.
Okay. Well, we just finished talking about the different pages that I think are essential for a winery website. Now we're going to change gears a little bit and talk about how we can nudge some customer behavior, how we can get them to take the actions that we want them to take. And when it comes to that, my biggest piece of advice is to make the important things easy, and make it super easy for your customers to do the things that are most important for your business. What are these important things? Well, it might be things like purchasing wine, or joining your mailing list, or taking a tasting reservation so you can then sell them wine, or whatever your business objective is. Whatever it is that's most important for your business, you want to make sure that is as easy as possible for your customers to find and take out and take advantage of. So when it comes to making important things easy, we have three main techniques that we're going to talk about. And the first one is intuitive navigation. The second one is effective calls to action. And the third one is featured sections. So let's go ahead and start with intuitive navigation. When I'm talking about intuitive navigation, what I mean is put things where people expect to find them. And when it comes to getting around your website, they frankly expect to find a menu at the top of your website. On a mobile device, that menu might be collapsed down to another menu, and there are some arguments on that it should be at the bottom instead of the top, but as a general rule, that's not where people look for it. They look for it at the top of your website. And so I think my default answer is if you have a main menu, put it where people are going to look for it. We use an example like this in one of the templates that we provide for our customers for their websites, and you can see there at the top we have a main menu. And the thing I want to sort of draw your attention to is it's not every page on the website. It is, in this case, the 6 or 7 most important things. And even though this is 6 or 7 items, I think there's even better argument for there being 5 or 6 items. The reason why is because you don't want this to be just a bucket with every single page. You want this to be the most important pages on your website, the pages that customers are always looking for, or the pages that you want to drive customers towards. And when you add every single page up there, what happens is that you sort of dilute the importance of any individual item up there, and you sort of overwhelm the visitor with options. Instead, limit this menu and just put the things on there that you most want to highlight. If you have extra pages, like a lot of those administrative pages we talked about, privacy policies, terms of service, trade and distribution, put those in the footer of your website. If people are really looking for them, they'll find them down there, but it's not going to distract from the e-commerce purpose of your website. So that's intuitive navigation. The second thing I want to talk about is effective calls to action. So if you're not familiar with the term call to action, a call to action is simply a prompt that's designed to encourage a specific action. So you've probably run into them before on the web. Things like shop now, or free shipping on your first order, claim your discount today, or all tasting fees waived in February, schedule your tasting now. These are messages that are designed to get the website visitor to take a particular action. And notice that of the ones I just read, there's different lengths there. Different lengths of calls to action are appropriate for different situations. You'll probably use shorter ones as button labels. You'll probably use longer ones as the headings, so that when you have more room to spare. But the best calls to action don't just ask for a click. Instead, they sort of guide visitors towards something that's valuable. For example, I said one of them was free shipping on your first order, claim your discount. Well, that pretty clearly states what it is the customer is going to be getting in return for that click. They're going to be getting free shipping on that first order, and that's been shown to actually work better than just a simple click here or learn more or something like that. Let me show you two different examples of calls to action in websites. The first one, this is another one of our templates, and you'll notice that when you look at this page, the first thing that sort of jumps out at you are these red buttons that are on that green background. They are impossible to miss. They occupy prime real estate on this page. They're in the hero section. Pretty much everyone who visits this website is going to see these buttons. And these are the calls to action that we're trying to put in people's faces here. We're trying to entice them to visit us, or to shop for some wine, or to join our wine club. Now, in this particular case, we have 3 different buttons. I would again argue that 2 is probably better than 3. If you know which actions are most valuable for your business, those are the ones you want to highlight. And adding more has a tendency to sort of detract from the most important ones. So this is a really good example of using buttons as a call to action. Another type of call to action, if you don't want to use buttons, is something we call cards. And so if we look at this website template, you'll notice down at the bottom here that we have a number of different rectangles. And these rectangles in the business are referred to as cards. The advantages of using these cards is that instead of just having just the text, visit us or shop wine or wine club, you also have the ability to include some inviting imagery to sort of draw them in, to make a connection with the visitor and entice them to click on it. You also have the opportunity, although it's not shown here, of adding a subheading beneath each of those lines of text there. So instead of just visit us, it'd be visit us and enjoy our great wines, or shop wine, and then below that be 10% discount in February, or whatever it might be that you want to try to provide some value with them. So we looked at calls to action using buttons and using cards. The last thing I want to look at is using featured sections. And featured sections is a little bit different than the other ones we've looked at. When we're talking about intuitive navigation or calls to action, what we're trying to do there is try to make important information easy for the visitor to find. When we're talking about featured sections, we're taking that content and shoving it in their face. We are no digging required. The most important things are going to be taken out from lower levels of the website and brought up higher, so that it's sort of slapped in their face, and they're forced to deal with it. And the nice thing about that is that it makes it super obvious on how to do some of the most important things, and sometimes the most popular things. This is super helpful when you're trying to highlight your most popular purchases, or maybe your most profitable purchases. It's also helpful for highlighting actions that are correlated with purchases, like doing a wine club sign up, or scheduling a tasting, or things like that. Let me show you an example of what we're talking about. So this is another one of our templates. And if we look at this template, you are greeted with the hero section here. But then if we scroll down, we have a section with our story of our wine and our winery, and then boom, we're slapped in the face with featured wines. They don't need to go dig to purchase wine. They don't need to go even find a shop button. They don't need to go navigate different levels. Our most popular purchases are right here on the front page. They can take a look at the ones that they want, and if any of those are the wines they seek, they can add them to the cart right then and there. This makes purchasing super quick, super easy for your most popular or your most profitable wines. And it's a great way to sort of bubble that up to the top and encourage people to make those purchases. So we've looked at intuitive navigation. We've looked at the featured sections, and we've looked at calls to action. And that is sort of the three tips that we have for nudging customer behavior. There was a lot that we talked about today, and we've only sort of scratched the surface here. If you find yourself in a situation where you could use some help as far as putting your website together or integrating with VenoShipper, I want to offer my services. I mentioned before that we're from Cellarfront, and we specialize in small wineries. We can help you create a top-notch winery website that integrates with VenoShipper and other platforms. We can help you with the customization to make sure that your shopping pages look like they're part of your website and not part of some other service. And most of all, because we work with small wineries, we know that cash flow is always an issue. So instead of charging, $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 up front for that some design agencies charge, our model is based off of a monthly subscription. So the idea is that we charge you a small monthly fee with no setup fees, and you get all of our services in exchange. So we take care of all the details, including website hosting, any future updates that are required. We'll even renew your domain for part of that. And it's, the idea is that we take care of your website so that you can take care of your vineyard and your wine. So if any of that sounds like it might be interesting or we might be helpful to you, I encourage you to reach out. You can email me at charles@cellarfront.com, or you can learn more at our website at cellarfront.com. Thanks for your time, guys.
Thanks so much, Charles.
Thank you. That was wonderful. All right, we have a couple more questions. Let me scroll up so I don't miss any. Integrations. We will email you all about integrations. Thank you for sharing your emails. What are the pros and cons on making a drop down? Sorry, it keeps moving on me. What are the pros and cons on making drop down menu items? What are the pros and cons?
I'm going to assume what they're talking about, and it's not entirely clear to me, but I'm going to assume that they're talking about drop down menus in the main menu. So instead of having just their items in their main menu, on a mouse over, a menu drops down with more sub items. The pros are that it makes it a little bit easier to group together and organize like pages. The con is that those pages are a little bit buried. That's what you're balancing against. Everything that we do in optimizing user behavior is a balancing act between trying to get people to do what we want versus not cluttering things up. And if you have customer facing pages that are logically connected and you want them up there, but you don't want to clutter up your main menu, grouping them together into one submenu can be a good way of doing that. I use submenus all the time, but it sort of depends on what their purpose is. If it's really important, like your shop wine button, for example, you want that at the top level. You don't want that in a submenu. If you find yourself putting something in a submenu, it really shouldn't be one of your most important pages. It should be a secondary page that's customer facing, but you just didn't quite rise to the level of being in the main menu by itself.
Okay, thank you. What are the best ways to identify friction points in the conversion process that cause customers to drop out, do you think?
Well, there are tools that you can use. There are analytic packages, which we didn't get into, that will actually go so far as to show heat maps of where people are moving their mouse and where they give up and things like that. That's pretty far beyond what we're talking about today, though. I think from a beginner standpoint, the best way to look at this is to get a fresh pair of eyes on it. And my suggestion is that you don't try to look at this yourself and analyze it, because you are going to be so familiar with your website already that you're not going to recognize the hard parts. Maybe get a spouse or a friend to look at it, or better yet, a customer who hasn't seen the website yet, and look over their shoulder and say, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go buy a bottle of wine. This is the bottle of wine I want you to find. And see if they can do it. See if they can find the purchase page. See if they can find the right SKU that they are looking for, and see if it's possible. In general, I will say that I think the things that make navigating more difficult are multiple levels of the further down you have to dig in order to get to anything, the harder things are going to be. So in general, I think I mentioned this earlier on, that one of the things you want to do is sort of flatten that hierarchy. And I think that's probably the best thing you can do is you try not to put anything that's 5 or 6 clicks away from the homepage. Try to keep everything as flat as possible so that it's close to the surface.
I have a funny anecdote about that, but if you find like a 15-year-old that is very not afraid to tell you because they're so used to using websites, obviously they're not going to purchase the wine, but have them analyze your website. They'll give you brutal honesty, and that'll help you out. I've experienced that a few times. Um, we have a question about Arkansas. Arkansas did recently pass a law, but it's a little more convoluted. You have to do label registration. There's some things that go into it. I will email you, Alex, about Arkansas. If anyone else is curious about Arkansas, you can email customer service at vinoshipper.com and we can guide you on that. Seller front integrate with Commerce 7. Seller front is not an integration. It is well, you can explain better. You're a service.
I didn't get the question.
Seller front integrate with Commerce 7?
Yeah. So that although we're working with VinoShipper today, we are sort of platform agnostic, and we work with VinoShipper, so Commerce 7, Bottle 360, a lot of the different ones that you may have heard of. And the idea is that we actually provide you with the website. That's what it boils down to, and we will use your API credentials to connect the front end of your website after we've got it designed, and connect that to the back end purchasing engine, so that whatever type of shop you're using will appear in your website, and it'll be seamless with the rest of your website. Everything will be styled so that it looks like it's all part of a whole, rather than as something that was just bolted on later.
If you have one varietal, is it necessary to have multiple pages on your website?
Probably. I mean, I'm making some assumptions about what he's talking about here, but my assumption is that he's talking about whether he can just get away with just having a single shop page and just put everything on one page. I mean, you can certainly do that, but I think typically people who are looking at wine might be interested in more information than just the varietal information. They might be looking for information about, which vineyard it came from, or what the growing season was like in that particular vintage. I mean, there's a ton of different variables that go into it besides just the varietal.
Yeah.
But I think
lean into your story. If you
Yeah.
have only one, like lean into your story and what makes you unique, for sure.
that's something that I think there's enough. Each winery is different, obviously, and I think that part of it depends on what what makes your winery different, and that might be something that if you reach out, I'd be happy to talk to you about it more. But the answer might be a little bit different depending on the specifics of each particular winery, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Should we include links to our newsletters on the website?
I probably would. I mean, if that's something that's available to you, if you're like you're using Mailchimp or something like that, I know they keep those archived. You can certainly do that. Another alternative would be, instead of linking to the like Mailchimp, just including your newsletter on your website. That keeps sort of the SEO, the value of that on your website rather than off to MailChimps. And there's no reason why you can't use the same articles that you're using in your newsletter, just repost them to your blog. If you're writing those articles anyways, I think including those in your blog as individual articles is probably the most valuable way of using that information, because then you can trickle that out. Even though your newsletter gets published once a month, say, your articles can be trickled out, every week that way, and that gives you a little more advantage. I think when search engines are looking at your website, they can see that you are posting on a regular, timely basis, and I think that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. having everything kind of work in a circular motion. I mean, if you're already writing a newsletter that you send out via MailChimp or Klaviyo, use those on your blog, on your website, because the newsletter is going to people that you already have in your audience. So the people that are seeing your website might not necessarily be in that audience. And then, circling with your socials, I think it should all be a nice kind of ecosystem that feeds each other, in my view. Um, okay, I'm just making sure I didn't miss any questions. Lots of great community in here. Let's just see. Purchase directly. Pros and cons. Not sure that I missed anything. You see anything that I missed, Adrian?
Put myself on mute instead of unmuting me. I don't think so. We do have one. Oh wait, there's a couple in the
Oh,
Q&A
yep,
box.
yep.
Oh, those are just Ray. I sent Ray asked, is there a way to add a featured section with add to cart without leaving the host website not being redirected to Vino Shipper? And I just put in the resources about our add to cart buttons, which can do exactly that.
Yeah. And then any recommendations for enhancing SEO?
I think in general, the main thing is to publish content. That's really what it boils down to, and publish content that's relevant. If you are talking about things that are, related to wines, related to your wines, related to your AVAs, talking about things that are going on in your winery, talking about things that are going on in the vineyard. I mean, the main thing is have a consistent flow of information. That's, I think, one big thing with the blog. As far as the website itself, apart from the blog, the main thing you're looking at there is probably being conscious of keywords and making sure that they're in the right place at the right time. Don't go stuffing them in everywhere that you can, but be intelligent about where they naturally fit in and using them there. So if your major pitch is that you are biodynamic from Virginia, those are words that you're going to want to have in your website, and probably in the headlines and the titles of your pages and things like that. But the specifics, SEO is sort of a dark art, and there's no one way of doing it, and there's lots of ways of doing it poorly, honestly. And my best advice is to look at the key phrases that you think your customers are going to be searching for, and then work some of those phrases into your website. And then the idea is that those particular phrases will become associated with your website in search engines. That way it'll bubble up when people search for them. Now, the trick for that, of course, is knowing what your customers are searching for. And that's really hard to do sometimes, especially for small time operators like you and me that don't have the resources of Fortune 500 companies. And, the trick there, though, is to think about things from your customers' perspectives, or go online and look for the sorts of questions that your customers or people like your customers are asking, and try to have some of those same phrasings in your website, whether that is in the blog, whether that's on your front page in headings and things like that. But that's really what it boils down to, is having relevant information that people are searching for. And if you can do that, then you'll find yourself over time being more successful with SEO. That's not a guarantee, though. It's really hard. There's a lot of people that are all clamoring for the same customers, and it really takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of consistency too. So,
Yeah. Also, and I know people have mixed feelings about AI, but that's the world we're in today. You can take your URL and put it into ChatGPT, Claude, and with specific prompts, ask it, to look at your local SEO signals, your content quality, your keyword targeting. And if you don't even know what to ask it first. Like, can you analyze my website and me know if it's good for SEO? You can start with the basics and kind of keep diving deeper. That's something I would do probably because it's just easy. And then I would use that as a plan to what I need to fix, if you can't afford to have someone professional help you. That'd be something I would maybe do. Um, and then last question, most recommended web shop slash catalog manager to work with Vino Shipper. We can work with many different platforms. Squarespace and WordPress tend to be the easiest to directly embed our cart onto. Other commerce sites like WooCommerce, Shopify, things like that, we absolutely can, but there is some, they are a commerce site, so they don't necessarily let you directly embed the cart. So there's like some workarounds on those. But if you are starting from scratch and want kind of something affordable and easy, I would probably choose either WordPress or Squarespace to start.
If
Also,
I can put in one vote here
go
for
ahead.
WordPress,
Yeah.
we use WordPress for all of our websites at Sellerfront, and it's very flexible and it's pretty easy to use. There's styling things. There's things can always be easier, but it is a super flexible platform. And if you're wondering if something can be done in a particular platform, the answer is generally yes in WordPress, because everyone uses it. It is the most widely used platform on the web, and you're probably not the first person to run into whatever problem you run into. It's probably someone else has already tackled it and found a solution for it.
I also want to
Go
tap
ahead.
onto the what's your most recommended web shop and catalog manager that flows into Vino Shipper. I would challenge you to reach out to us and let us know what you're looking for. Just because there's a high likelihood that we offer what you're looking for. If you're looking at places like WooCommerce, yeah, I would reach out. Let us know what you're looking for that you think we don't have. We can work with you to figure that out.
Mhm. Traditional WordPress or the block builder format? One of you can answer that better than me, probably.
The block builder has won me over. It took a while, but it has won me over. It's things. There enough of the infrastructure and enough of the ecosystem has sort of moved over that pretty much anything you want to do is possible in the block builder now, and it's just really nice to have that visual building interface in my mind. For the first couple of years, things were a little rough, and if anyone out there doesn't know what this even means, don't worry about it. It won't affect you. But the first couple of years were rough when they were making that transition. But I think the transition has been pretty much made at this point, and the block builders have come out on top, and there's a lot of options there that make things a lot easier.
Yeah.
Another
Well,
plus
thank
for
you.
WordPress is we do have a WordPress plugin, so you have to
Yeah.
do no coding. You just put it on your website as a block. But we can also provide more information. We have that all in our help documentation.
Yeah, if it was me, that's what I would use because that is not my forte. But um, well, thank you all so much for joining us. I hope that this was valuable to you. If you have any follow-up questions or want to dive deeper on something, you can email us at customerservice@vinoshipper.com. You can also reach out to Charles at Sellerfront if you would like to talk to him about his services. He would absolutely be able to help you with your website and optimizing it. So thank you all again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thanks, Charles.
No problem.